Shalom, shalom. Hello, hello. We are live on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Welcome to PRAGMAGICK. I am Keats Ross, and I am with a great old friend, the part and parcel of the occult podcasting triangle from, God, it's been like years now since
Yeah.
we started these kind of ventures. But yeah, good friend Erik Arneson of Arnemancy. Good to have you here, brother.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's good to I mean, we haven't podcasted or done anything like this together in years. So it's
It's
great to do it
crazy.
again. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been
Yeah.
so long, but
I
we
know
do
we've
keep
both
up.
become like famous millionaire podcasters by now. I mean, I can't believe it. Just
Maybe one of us, and not me.
uh
But
and not me.
yeah, but yeah, good to see you. You couldn't like we saw each other in Portland a couple weeks ago, and it just it reminded me like we all of the wellspring of knowledge and personage that's around me, and sometimes I can get so caught up in my own brain and oeuvre or art barfs or whatever that I forget to, check in and keep up with everybody. And it's so silly because
Mhm.
you're doing so much great stuff. And, your podcast has always been wonderful, from My Alchemical Bromance to Arnemancy. I think I was your last My Alchemical Bromance guest too.
You
Um,
were, yeah.
yeah.
I remember we were recording at the Muddy Rudder in Portland.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It
I
was pretty
miss the
fun.
Muddy Rudder.
Me too. Yeah, I was just thinking of. I think that was the last time we. Was that the last time we recorded anything together? I think that was.
No, so there was an ill-fated me, you, and
Right.
Alex did a
Yes.
pub.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
lost episode. Yeah.
The last episode. I believe I have the audio for that, but I don't think it's usable because I think we were. I mean, not only were we perhaps not in our right minds when we were doing that, but we were like sitting right next to the speaker, the music speaker in the bar. So it's probably all like George Thorogood and Led Zeppelin
Right.
over us.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I remember specifically Alex and I getting into a funny argument about why it's pronounced machinations or not, or machinations, and why it's not pronounced machinations. And it must have
Mm.
lasted like 20 minutes of just me and him, like me doing a stupid deconstructionist, like, but really, if you think about linguistically, he's like, shut up, what are you talking about?
I mean, it's
Yeah.
machine, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So but yeah, that was funny. But anyways, again, another beautiful synchronous thing was in reinvigorating this podcast or this project, or broadcasting in the esoteric medium. It's going to be so good to hear your developments as a broadcaster. But not only that, like um your oeuvre of actually teaching magic and doing these classes, and
Mm-hmm.
being somewhat of a kind of I don't know, esoteric coach of sorts. I think I heard
Ooh.
someone use the title, and I don't like this title, but something like esoteric what do they call it, personal trainer, which
Oh God.
wasn't a
I
fan of.
don't know. I don't know that I would be okay with that particular
Right.
label, and primarily because I mean, I rarely do sort of like the one-on-one sort of like coaching kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, you're
yeah,
probably more of a teacher, like classroom, not, I mean, not in a
yeah.
classroom, but you
Well,
teach
I
classes in person. Yeah.
in person and online. Yeah, I mean, I've been a public speaker for a really long time. Like I think I started public speaking in like 2005, 2006, but I just started. I think I kind of started doing the. God, I'd have to go look. I feel like I started doing classes online when the pandemic thing hit, because
Yeah.
I'd been teaching in person at a local occult shop, Invoke, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, what am I supposed to do? It was really fun to get that extra money every month, but also there's a lot of pressure on you when you're like putting classes together to sort of consolidate your thoughts and like put them together in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I kind of enjoy that. You know, I have to spend like a lot of time with the source material, and I make all these notes, and then I sort of distill it down into like slides, and then I never really like write out my talks. You know,
Yeah.
I'll have like notes that I'll follow, but I have to know the material well enough that I can just sort of speak with some talking points in front of me.
Right. There's got to be an element of jazz to it. Like you
Oh,
understand the
for
theory and the
sure.
skills, but yeah, you need to be able
Hmm.
to improvise and
Yeah,
you know, I it's something I have a teaching background as well, but I've never really maneuvered it into kind of this realm, even though, I'd love to, but I think what got me over that hump of me thinking like, why would anybody want to listen to me or anything was the realization that for me to better comprehend all of this would be to teach it. You know what I mean? It's almost like
for sure.
an education in teaching itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like I've only taught courses, you know, things that were more than one class a few times, and that's even more of a challenge because then you get feedback on how you've been doing,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
they come back and you have to be like, did anything I say stick?
Right.
Did what
Teacher
did
surveys.
I
Yeah.
actually teach? and and that's definitely that was definitely an eye opener. The first I think the first multi session course I taught was about cryptography,
That's right. Yeah.
and yeah,
I remember.
that might have been before I started podcasting, actually, wasn't it? That was a long
I
time
remember
ago.
you did a cryptography one, and I remember you did a sigil one. I think was like before,
Yeah,
or right before I left. You did it was at Invoke, I believe. Yeah.
yeah. But by then I was already podcasting. But yeah,
Right.
the cryptography one was even earlier than that, and it was kind of crazy because I had, you know, I'm a college dropout, and so
Me
I don't
too.
always, yeah, but like if you it doesn't matter if you go to college or not, if you do something for many many years you're still going to like learn a lot about it. And one of the
Right.
things that I kind of had failed to learn or failed to realize was that I had accumulated a good amount of like introductory knowledge that just isn't at all common, you know.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so I went in there thinking like, oh, this is going to be fun, I'm going to teach people this stuff, they're going to love it. And like the first class it's all just like, what's this mean, what's this mean? And I'm like, oh shit, I have to go even further back than this, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And so that was something I thought about that a lot when I started doing classes on occult and magic, because it's super easy. I mean, the occult world, the occultosphere, or whatever the hell, are we allowed to make up words? Um,
Yes, I
is
do all the time.
filled. Yeah, well, I mean, it's filled with like people who have been nerding out on it for decades.
Right.
And when you're somebody who's been nerding out on it for decades, you kind of tend to talk to the people who have been nerding out on it for decades. But when you want to take this material and make it accessible to other people who haven't, you know, been doing that but still want to get the benefits of it, you really have to like take a step back and be like, okay, what's considered basic knowledge here?
Right.
It
Yeah.
it makes me think of something that okay, so when I was in college I was studying physics, and it makes me think of something that my intro to physics professor taught, which was or said, which was something like he hated going to faculty parties because every physicist is expected to know all the basics of English literature, right? Like, oh, of course you've read Dickens. Oh, of course you've read, you know, Pride and Prejudice. Everybody's read those books, you know,
Right.
something like that.
Standardized knowledge. Yeah.
Right, except that the most basic physics stuff is not standardized knowledge. So like if
Right.
he brings up Isaac Newton, people are like, "Who?" Or they'll be like, "What?" They'll be like, "Oh, you mean that guy with the apple?" And
Hmm.
he was like, "It's so frustrating." I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There is a fine line. I think there are folks who do the introductory side really well.
Mhm.
I think there are
Yeah.
people that do the highbrow, highfalutin really well. And
Mhm.
there also needs to be a space for, yeah, the kind of permanent intermediary, you know, types that
Yeah.
are like, many years practicing, but still even kind of deconstructing the basics and like,
Mhm.
still learning, still applying everything, and still doing so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do see those factions, and I know that you envelop all three of those, especially with the podcast and with
Mm-hmm.
teaching. You said that it kind of, the pandemic really like set you on the path of doing more of the teaching. Did you
Mm-hmm.
notice, because there's been a lot of talk like the culture bump because of the pandemic, and I think through like just general desperation, a lot of people were kind of turning to magic.
Yeah, I don't know that it's desperation though. I'm not sure that I would call it desperation. I think that one of the things that happened during the pandemic is, everybody's life was upset,
Yeah,
and I mean that is, literally part of the magical path, right? The path of the initiate is like everything gets upset. Things get turned upside down, and and I don't know that it's necessarily desperation that would drive people to magic because of that, as much as a realization that uh, things aren't exactly as they seem.
hmm,
Systems aren't as stable as they seem, or life isn't as regular and predictable as it seems. So
sure,
I think it may have also been sort of a sense of curiosity, like if that part of my life wasn't true, what else isn't true?
yeah.
You
And
know?
it's enriching the mundane because now you're forced to kind of sit and meditate with it,
Mm-hmm.
all the
Yeah, yeah,
time.
for sure. Yeah, because, a lot of us ended up I mean, everybody was stuck at home, you
Hmm.
know, almost everybody. And so you had to spend a lot of time with your own brain,
Yeah,
your own mind. So I think it was more that. I don't know that I guess I just have maybe a base faith in people that they were doing it out of uh curiosity and exploration instead of desperation.
sure.
But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I mean, maybe, yeah, just because of the drama of the word desperation, but I think,
Yeah.
it's still, based in truth that, yeah, a lot of us do come to these outside, metaphysical tendrils of things because, we're not being met, we're not communing with anything anymore.
Mhm.
Things are breaking down, outside, within, whatever. And so it makes sense that during this like huge somatic rift that we're all sharing, that people were diving more into like these mediums, and
Mhm.
I was wondering if you've noticed, since because you've been doing uh magic themed broadcasting before the pandemic, you're going to
Mhm.
continue to do it ad infinitum. Like, have you noticed a sort of like a cultural like shift, like a drop off or a trend? Because I keep hearing
Hmm.
a lot of broadcasters talk about, there was a huge fad for a moment or something, and a lot of people kind of shuffled out. And I wonder if they're meaning, because of the pandemic bump or what.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I I I honestly I don't know. I mean, I watch my podcast numbers, and there definitely was a point at which the numbers kind of bumped upwards, like listeners bumped upwards, and then it kind of plateaued out.
Mm,
And that was definitely sometime over the past couple of years, but it's really hard to know what the cause of that was.
right. Yeah.
I think that there's definitely, like, it felt like tarot got incredibly popular for a little bit. I mean, there are definitely fads, but I'm not
Right.
sure how much they have. How much? That's a good question. I wish that I had an answer. I'm
Yeah, and
thinking
it's
and trying to figure out, like, and I honestly don't know. I
yeah.
mean, a lot of it is because of my own exposure. I stopped using Facebook, and I stopped hanging out on Twitter, and I stopped doing Instagram, and that definitely made my exposure to the occult world a lot smaller. But I also don't know, so it's hard for me. It would all be anecdotal. I don't really have any,
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm looking for, because I know there isn't really like an absolute answer to it. I think it's more me kind of rediscovering over and over again that there is no monoculture. There's no, everything is kind of cyclical and these things. And um as somebody who's never cared or looked at like analytics like that, I just find it interesting that maybe there was kind of like a mass movement towards it and away from it.
mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I was just wondering, as somebody, as long and storied as your career is, if you've noticed, especially when you're teaching, kind of introductory stuff, are you seeing a lot of
Yeah.
people coming to it?
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, I haven't done any like really introductory stuff in a while. I don't feel like. I feel like I've been kind of focusing on intermediary stuff. And so I've been teaching classes in person again at Dark Star Magic in Portland, which is a blast, by the way. The next time you're in town, if you're here during the day at all, you should go check it out. It's a really cool place. Um,
Yeah, I'd love to. I follow them on Instagram, and I know they've had a brash of like recent break-ins and stuff, which is
yeah, yeah, yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah. That was
Yeah,
crappy.
but
Um,
they look awesome. Yeah, it's great. I'm glad that there's
s-
more shops popping up.
oh, me too, and especially event spaces. So, and I feel like my audience there, the people who show up there, has sort of skewed a little older than I've seen before.
Mhm.
So it could be that there's things about it that are generational, um, that the honestly, yeah, I guess what my feeling is, I feel like I'm attracting an older audience now. Like
Yeah,
they aren't all like in their 20s looking for their first you know taste of the weirdness. They're kind of like in their 30s or 40s or even older than that, and they maybe they want like a more analytical or more structured approach, or maybe they're looking to incorporate older traditions, or they really like all the sigils and magic circles and stuff of the Renaissance, or I don't know. Who knows?
yeah.
Who knows? Or they like
Well, it's
math. Maybe
great.
they like. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's something for
Uh,
everyone. Yeah,
there is. I really wish that, I mean, those are some really interesting things to think about, and I'm going to think about them. I don't, I just, I feel like I don't have any really good insights on them right now. But I do
yeah.
know that when I started teaching at Dark Star, one of my first impressions was like, oh, it's not just kids,
Mm.
because that's kind of how I'd been feeling for a while. So that was kind of
Yeah,
cool.
and I mean, that's interesting. But you have, like I said, the wide breadth of, like
Hmm.
topics, no matter level, from adept or whatever downwards. But I know that, a big kind of confluence too for you has always been kind of grimoires and like
Hmm.
these. I say archaic, and I feel like it has a negative connotation when I say archaic, but really I just mean dusty old tomes.
They are dusty
Um,
old tomes for sure.
but like the progenitors of a lot of traditional craft
Yeah.
and and currents um yeah, and I just find it interesting how how you can delineate like a sigil class, but also like have some for the folks that are kind of more historically minded and
Yeah.
traditional. Yeah,
Well, it turns out a lot of times it's actually kind of easy because, like chaos magic, in particular, it reinvented the wheel a lot. So
yeah,
so like, the sigil making process where you like take the alphabet and like break it down. You take your words and remove the vowels and duplicates and like turn it into a
yeah.
symbol and
The
stuff.
Austin Osman
Like,
Fair. Yeah.
yeah, he didn't invent that.
Hmm.
Agrippa's got it in 3 books of occult philosophy. The whole thing, like servitors and stuff like that, like that wasn't invented by chaos magic.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
A lot of the stuff that chaos magic sort of rediscovered was already in older materials and older texts. It just was framed in different language, or done in a way that maybe isn't entirely identical. But I think that people, I mean, nobody, people don't really see that often. So, like
Yeah.
I just taught a class on Renaissance sigil magic, and I'm like, here are, 6 ways to make sigils out of grimoires, where they totally spell it out for you. You do it this way and this way and this way, um, and some of it is like really, really free form. I think there might be. I think there's also a lot. There's sort of an impression in modern grimoire magic, by which I mean, that's, let me define what that means first. Like modern
Sure.
grimoire magic, so there's sort of been a renaissance of studying grimoires that probably started in like the early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s. um, and there's a big school of practitioners and teachers in that area who I think I sort of call grimoire purists, who are like, there's a structure here. You have to follow all these steps. You have to get all these exact materials. You have to do all these things exactly how they would have done it. Otherwise, you're not working the grimoire.
Right.
Um, and that's intimidating. That's a lot of stuff to do. It's a lot of old materials to track down. You have to, I mean, the number of discussions I've had with people who don't realize that parchment is made out of animal skin, for instance,
Right.
like there's a
Sinew.
lot of, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really gross stuff you have to find, a lot of weird ingredients. And I think that there is such an adherence to doing things that old fashioned way that people are sort of forgetting that the fact that the reason the authors of the grimoire were doing that, it's because that's all they had.
Yeah.
They didn't have paper. They didn't have nice paper. They didn't have cheap paper. They didn't have
Right.
uh they didn't
Have
have light
ink.
bulbs. They
Yeah.
yeah, they had to make their own ink.
Right.
They definitely didn't have ballpoint pens. I mean, there were all these things that when they're talking about like getting the fancy oil lamp, that's made out of brass, blah 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 or whatever. What's they had never seen a light bulb. Like, would they have been thrown off by, an antique um, desk lamp with an Edison bulb? Like, that's pretty friggin' fancy. Like, why not? What's wrong with that?
I love that you're touching on this because I think a lot of what I find the roadblocks with people when it comes to that, yeah, is not only like the material hunting, but there seems to be like an implied classist kind of ideology where like you need to be afforded
Mm-hmm.
the time and like the wealth to find these materials, and I don't
Yeah.
think that's like necessarily at all what they were meaning. But that that could be a roadblock. But I also think
Right.
and you'd be great to talk to about this, but like when, yeah, like you were saying, like when is it okay to cook, right? Like when is it okay to
Mm-hmm.
be improvisational? Like how do you delineate what materials were just kind of the time and kind of largely inconsequential, and which ones, you really do need to seek out?
That's a really good question. And I guess I should say that like a lot of the grimoire magic that I focus on is like planetary magic stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah.
planetary magic, I think, is really well suited to that question because it tends to focus on like correspondences, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you can find like clues to how the correspondences are supposed to work or how you're supposed to look for them in texts like the three books of occult philosophy, where it's like, things with, flowers with six petals are, partaking of the sun, or you know things that come out at night are partaking of Saturn, or there are all these little rules like that, so you can kind of look at those and find your own correspondences, because the concept is that like the planetary rays are sort of a wash. The whole world is a wash in them. Everything
Right.
receives the influences from all the planets, and
It's
you just
got
have to sort of,
animus. Yeah.
yeah, and you just sort of have to figure out what would be the most, or what things around you. What do you have available? Modern witchcraft, like kitchen witchcraft, is like great at this. I
Right.
remember seeing, like TikTok witches or Instagram witches or whatever talking about like if you've got McCormick spices, those are great. Like you don't need to go find wild basil leaves and pluck them. Like just use some dried basil. Like it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And we see this in a lot of traditional texts too, because we have some working grimoires from like cunning folk and hedge witches and even like operating sorcerers, like the sorcerer's handbook from Venice. Like we see them making shit up and am I allowed to swear in this show? I'm sorry, I just used an adult word.
Yeah, absolutely. Swear away.
Okay. But we see people using those sorts of things, or like improvising uh all the time. Are you are you still here? Is Keats gone? Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, your
No problem.
swearing did that.
Ah,
No, I'm just
I'll do it
joking.
again.
Yeah.
But anyhow, like I was saying, we see people doing those improvisations a lot in actual working magicians' texts and notebooks and stuff. So it's not old. I mean, it's not new. Uh, and yeah, there is sort of almost a classist sort of thing there. Like, who in their right mind is going to be able to afford all of the leather and gold and inscribed chalices and daggers, from like the Key of Solomon,
Right.
um,
Or can
like
afford, the 6 months of retreat that you need for the Abramelin, you know?
exactly. But also at the same and that's okay. We see, for instance, like the pentacles in the Key of Solomon get repurposed in some forms of folk magic, and
Mhm.
that's cool. Like I've experimented with that a little bit, and not only is it cool, but it is actually kind of fun and easy magic, especially nowadays because we've got laser printers and colored paper.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
oh man.
No, and I love that. I love that confluence of the, kind of modern ramshackle kind of technologies, working within that
Hmm.
those constructs. Like as you were saying, like having a laser printer. I mean, a lot of the, sound magic, the ability to like, work with cassette tapes and drum machines and you know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Um or like, sampling kind of Tuvan throat singing or something and working with the hemisync kind of binaural stuff just with a
Hmm.
Walkman. It's just, yeah, it's incredible stuff. But yeah, I love this idea of this like because a lot of my practice too is very, it's ramshackle like that. It's very much
Yeah.
like kitchen sink, what do I have around, like and I've always loved that. And yeah, I guess that is very much part and parcel of like the cunning folk kind of uh paradigm or whatever. But I'm seeing a lot more be embraced, aside from, the, as you were saying, like this, I don't want to say snooty, but kind of snooty, highbrow
Yeah.
traditionalists, which there's a place for that too. There's a reason
Oh,
why
for
we're able
sure.
to study these currents, and that's because people are continuing to charge them, the way
Hmm.
they were done. I'd be hard pressed though to find like documented proof that somebody in this day and age could, to the T, like perform, you know, um, like a ritual from a grimoire, back then, like to the T with every ingredient, or like, even,
Yeah.
goat
I know there are people.
sacrificing, which that sounds
Right.
absurd, but there is a little bit of that.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you go back to the Picatrix
Right.
or the PGM, like there's lots of animal sacrifice. I mean, I know there are people doing it and there are people trying.
Hmm.
I for one am not interested in animal sacrifice,
Yeah.
we even have modern religions that practice animal sacrifice.
Yep.
I think that frequently there is a misunderstanding of animal sacrifice where people think it's like a waste of the animal, but frequently it's kind of like a ritual killing where the sacrifice is
Yeah,
actually
it's like a
consumed.
kosher, or
Yeah,
halal
it's like
type. Yeah,
kosher. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
But I say that just to illustrate, the kind of the lengths one would have to go, to perform some of
Mm-hmm.
these. And talking about the PGM or something
Mm-hmm.
similar. I think we've talked about this last time, but that unusual phrase, or unusual, pun intended, because it says to add the usual
Yeah.
a lot in the actual, in the grimoire, in your
Yeah.
ritual
Yeah.
steps. And I love that because to me it's almost like this foresight of knowing that this is going to be performed outside of this time that it's written, outside of,
Mm-hmm.
this government of which we're operating under, outside of, the linguistic barriers. So like, just do what you do. on top of follow these steps. Yeah.
You know, I hadn't really considered that very carefully in the context of the PGM, but I do use that term. Like I used to sort of like put together frame rituals for people, or, you know, for classes and stuff. But now I
Mhm.
usually do just be like, you know, just do the usual. Open the way you always open, close
Right.
the way you always close, and then once you've got your space, here's some stuff you do. Because I want I want there to be jazz in Magic. I want
Mhm.
people to be making up their own stuff and doing things their own way and having their own sort of relationships with it. Like I think that's kind of part of the beauty of it. You know, it is supposed to be, you know, a type of performance art. Even if
Right.
it's private. It's like a combination of performance art and prayer, which I did not invent that. Dan Atrell said that, but I
Mhm.
am just stealing from him now. Sorry, Dan. He
Yeah,
had a
no, I
third thing
love
in there
that.
too.
I love that because yeah, that's quite like literally what I do. Um,
hmm
with like, within audiomancy or any of the like art constructs of magic is it's literally performance art and
Yeah.
prayer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a beautiful way to illustrate it. Because there is like a pomp and ceremony and a beauty in the drama and getting outside of your comfort, you know,
hmm
to do these things. That's a sacrificial offering in and of itself, to be put in these vulnerable kind of,
Oh, for sure.
huge productions. So that is a
And
part of the usual. Um,
yeah,
w-
I was just realized that like I was listening to you talk about it, then I was going to say, and art's like that too, and then I was like, oh wait, he was just talking about
yeah,
performance, wasn't he? But yeah, I mean, but that's I think part of the beauty of it, right? Like there is sort of like, you know, the like magical stage fright, right? Like you're
right.
overcoming sort of like what the hell am I doing? Why am I wearing this this weird white bathrobe and a crown of herbs on my head and lighting candles in my living room? Like what the hell is going on?
Yeah. Well, and that's a lot of what was behind the past year or so doing these audiomancy like improvised live streams. And like
Uh-huh.
part of that was that kind of sacrificial part of these are all improvised, so anything could happen and I'm going to be accountable to it because it's going to be streamed live. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like humiliation ritual somewhat, you know. But what it's done is wonders and training kind of a rhythm like within to kind of trust yourself when
mhm.
working under this like it's almost like because when you do perform these rituals they don't have to be live streamed or documented. You are performing to specters, right, or to the other or even to yourself. Like there is a viewing party of some sort,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is it's wonderful to think about. See, no, you're not alone. But I was using the Divergent Magic book I put out. I found one of the uses recently was actually deconstructing what the usual is, and so I could go back and have it listed like what these operations are, so that once
Yeah.
I create another, ritual, I can couple it with, add the usual at the beginning at the end of this,
Mhm.
and then I'd have it, written down and listed. And that's been wonderful in kind of a schematic of like these characteristics of your own personal touch on things that you don't normally look twice at, you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
now you can kind of deconstruct and see like, oh, interesting. These tethers of how I'm doing this. So where does this come from?
Yeah. Yeah, how do you so like do you find your usual has sort of evolved over time?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say I've delineated it into, like, a few usuals, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I think I kind of have too. I think I know what you're
Yeah,
saying. Sort of like depending on what what system you're working with or what your intent is. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Like even when I just want to like sit down and meditate, I still kind of have a usual before I start, I guess.
Right, yeah, yeah. But, yeah, I
hmm
love that because it's so, intrinsically you too, what this usual is. Um, And
Yeah,
speaking
for
of,
sure.
meditation, that's something like, have I ever really broken down like what like just my general meditation practice is? Have I documented that before? If it's not like doing a certain type of meditation, like how do I, get into that
Mm.
state? And yeah, finding out like the voices and like constructs of how you talk to yourself to get yourself into these usual spots, has been really
Oh, that's
interesting.
yeah. I don't know that I've ever really spent a lot of time paying attention and being aware of that, but I think I'm
Mhm.
going to have to now. That's some good insight.
It's interesting. I think it's more humorous than anything. Like there's like
Oh,
an intrinsic humor, I think, to a lot of the stuff that I've found in myself. Like there's a
uh-huh.
part of me that has this weird kind of objective, like judgmental thing towards me that I find funny, you know,
Mhm.
like double speak. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, all that to say that I love that you share that ethos and what you're doing as far as teaching these grimoires, but also wanting the jazz, wanting the usual, the many
Mhm.
usual, right? To be a
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
it. And you said you're teaching this Arbatel class at Darkstar. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I actually have a link too. I'll share.
Okay, yeah. I think the Dark Star class is a really really great example of it because the Dark Star, or I'm sorry, the Arbatel class is sort of a really great example of what we're talking about because the Arbatel hardly contains any ritual. It's a lot of just sort of do the usual stuff, but there's nothing in there that requires you to have, fancy daggers or ritual cloaks or anything of that nature. It kind of, the Arbatel is a really, um, on its surface, kind of a simple grimoire. It's not very long. It's it's basically 49 aphorisms or these like short little sayings, except for one of the sayings which is very long and has all the Olympic spirits in it. And a lot of it sort of contains stuff like, if you want to practice magic, you have to like be a good person. You have to
Yeah,
work on being good. Like, don't be covetous. Don't don't be cruel. Like, try to be good. And that's something that really, really caught my eye a few years ago. I don't know how many years ago, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, because I had been working with these sorts of, uh, I want to call them like virtue systems. I sort
hmm,
of think of them as like, they're sort of like practical spirituality. It's like your spirituality, your magical practice in the privacy of your own home is one thing, but what happens when you interface with the world? What happens when you go out and you encounter the world? Like, is your magic affecting you as a person? So, in particular, I was attracted to this system called Musar, which is kind of, I guess, a kind of like exoteric Kabbalah. And
yeah,
the whole, yeah, I think we've talked about this before, haven't we?
yeah. You've
But so
mentioned
so
it before. Yeah,
yeah, so Musar is all about sort of like finding these sort of like uh, divine traits that we're supposed to emulate. Like honesty and loving kindness and all these sorts of things, and sort of nurturing them in yourself. So when I came across this stuff in the Arbatel, I was like, oh, hold on a second. There's like a parallel here that's kind of interesting. Um, but beyond that, the Arbatel does this whole thing where another big element of it is like this book is about learning secrets and learning how to keep secrets. And
hmm,
the secrets are things that are revealed to you through your practice. So it gives, the Olympic spirits, the 7 Olympic spirits, one for each planet, and then their sigils. And then it tells you, like, these aren't the right names or symbols. Like, you're going to
interesting.
have to go find those yourself, and they will be private to you, and they will only be good as long as you're alive, basically. Like you can use these maybe to jumpstart things, but you're really going to have to, you know, try to be good and try to do all these prayer. It doesn't even have a lot of prayers. It has like one prayer, right? So there's hardly any real spell work in the Arbatel, just sort of this almost like guide for bootstrapping your own thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I've always really, really liked that. But then it also has some elements of grimoire numerology and like remedial math that grimoires seem to love so much, you know? Everything in that book is based on the number seven. Like it loves the number seven. There's seven septenaries, seven uh, aphorisms,
Yeah.
aphorisms in each septenary, seven Olympic spirits. There are seven greater secrets and seven medium secrets and seven lesser secrets and just sevens all over the place, which is really, really entertaining to kind of like dig into. And then it
Hmm.
has some other like fun math stuff. Like I found there's a number in there that it sort of mentions as an attribute of one of the spirits. And I was looking at this number and I'm like, why? What's up with this number? It's what is it? 36,536. And I was like, that's not a multiple of seven. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So I went and looked, and it is 4567 times 8, which they
Wow.
must have. The author of that book must have thought they were being very clever.
I love it. That's the kind of intrinsic intent that I hold dear in a lot of
Yeah,
these,
me too.
just that,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just you're forever unpacking, and it's like, yeah, the Easter egg kingdom,
I
but I
love the math Easter eggs in grimoires. So they're just because almost all of the grimoires we have now, maybe all of them, were written before the scientific revolution, right? So they were written before Isaac Newton. They were written before calculus. They were written before Kepler and his planetary laws. So even though they were probably like educated people writing the grimoires, their level of math education compared to like the average modern Americans' math education is pretty remedial.
yeah.
So they think they're being really, really clever with this math. And then you go and look at it and you're like, this is the shittiest word problem I've ever seen. Like, why did you write it this way? And when I write it out, why is it like the dumbest equation from like a sixth grade math quiz?
I can see them going, "Huh,"
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
like, this is very clever.
Keep your
No one will
secrets.
understand my secret math.
Yeah. I love that, there's a part I just wrote down too, because when you're talking about, the Arbatel, and I love this, like, they give you enough to create your own, but they're not gonna tell you what they've found. Like,
Yeah.
those, equation solving is, like, left up to you, but they give you kind of examples of what, you know, they came across in a way, and I love
Yeah.
that. Do you find that's kind of another, not to bring it into kind of a big stratosphere type question, but I think with the advent of, broadcasting, us both being practitioners, or, writers or artists or whatever, it do you find a fine line between what you're willing to share, your own personal findings, and like spiritual, kind of, I don't know,
Yeah.
goals that, yeah.
I consider it a pretty firm line, I think.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of stuff that I won't share, and a lot of experiences that are personal to me. And I think that that's something that we get warned about in a lot. You know, the Arbatel has some lines in it, something like, ah, I totally was just typing this out. I bet you it's on my other screen, but it's something like, uh, don't give good meat to the dogs or something like that. And then, like Trithemius, he writes something like, give hay to an ox and sugar to a parrot only. Like there are these constant admonitions to, like, you know, the things, the secret experiences, the part of the secret experience and the inner experience is yours alone.
sure.
And I think that's really important to learn. And I think it's important to kind of stick to that. And I think a big part of that is because, um, a magician or a virtuous magician who's following these sorts of paths should be humble.
Mhm.
And I'm not
Absolutely.
super good at that all the time.
But that's what a
So
humble person
remember,
would
yeah,
say. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, it's just sort of like in the heat of the moment or getting caught up in just life. I think I can be sort of an arrogant prick every once in a while. So having the reminder that there are these secrets that are like mine that shouldn't be shared. Um, I think it's sort of an important reminder, like, you shouldn't be bragging, you shouldn't be boasting. I mean,
Yeah. I guess I never, when I was thinking of that question, I didn't really consider the like the successes. It's funny because like the way I was visualizing this idea of like uh from the artist, to the practitioner, like one I think is kind of very drawn to sharing good and bad experiences through. I guess there's a
yeah,
there's a secretism and symbology through the art, but like as as a
yeah,
writer, um like I am my whole thing, especially with like haunt manual and stuff, was to talk like warts mainly. Like the
mm-hmm,
successes themselves are basically like if something was like created, right? It's not they're not like, oh,
yeah,
I've reached another echelon of adeptness or something. It's more like sharing the rough and tumbles of a personal practice. And I was
right,
wondering, yeah, because I'm finding myself now, I think after years now of sharing this type of stuff or discussing this stuff, like, yeah, there are some things that like I don't need to paint myself that naked all the time, you know?
oh, for sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think maybe that might be part of the difference between or I don't know if difference is the right word, but I think that you know when you are when you are making art that is meant to be shared and performed, that's something where the goal is to show off what you're
Mm,
doing and what you are creating, right? Like
yeah.
that is specifically made to share. Even if it's magically operant work, it's still something that's being made specifically to share.
Yeah.
So so like some magical work though that is sort of it's like writing in your diary or writing like secret poems in your diary. Like you
Yeah.
might be pouring your heart out and you might still be creating art, but it's not really for consumption outside. And that's okay. It's okay to have private things. We
Right.
we all
Yeah.
have a private life that exists in our imaginal world, and there's never any way to portray it perfectly,
Yeah. And I
right?
just I find it so enlightening that the idea, I think most people would get very annoyed because it's not paint by numbers, do this, receive
Mm-hmm.
this sort of thing. And I personally, that's why I love it because it's almost exemplifying the process. It's like if you were interested in this, you'd have to do this yourself to kind of, see what you discover. And yeah, I
Yeah.
love that about the Arbatel. That's it's clever, but it's also, like, really enticing as far as, like, sharing within a practice. Like, you don't need to, give your own personal experience as much as, basically giving them an example, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the big thing about it is you're kind of like you're setting them up for their own personal experience.
Right.
So I honestly, and I think because of that, I don't really consider the Arbatel to be, the best grimoire for beginners.
For sure. Yeah.
Because you already have to have the usual down before you go in there because it's not giving it to you.
Yeah.
So, so I would say that like it's an intermediate level book. It's like the thing that gets you set up for moving into advanced stuff. It's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I just yeah,
But
I find it
yeah.
fascinating, how, like, you've kind of talking about, applied kind of modern, tactics to working with these grimoires, that secret, mechanism of it just like really spoke to me, especially as, I'm sure it has spoken to you as being a broadcaster, as being a writer
Hmm.
within all of this stuff. So you're already finding like an application of it through how you're teaching the knowledge, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I and it makes it tough. I teach art of memory classes a lot,
That's right. Yeah.
and the art of memory, especially the way I use it, is to me very private. And the feedback I always get is like, "We want some examples," and I'm always like, "Oh God." So it makes me have to like go back and think of how to present examples that aren't necessarily things that I've used, right? Because
Right.
because a big part of art of memory is like mnemonic images that can be very personal or very um revealing about my inner life that aren't necessarily meant for other people to see. So
Right. Yeah.
there's
And like
art.
you
So yeah,
sharing that alone could also like it should just muddy the waters. They could
yeah,
be
yeah,
focusing on something they shouldn't be. So yeah, it's
exactly,
interesting.
exactly. So I've done stuff where I've like just worked on getting good at coming up with memory images on the spot that are good to share and stuff. But yeah, it yeah, I definitely, I guess, in summation,
Yeah.
I do find that there is a pretty firm line for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. I guess you'd have to be too. There's also kind of a journalistic aspect to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as a writer and a teacher. And so, yeah, you kind of have to have like an ethos. You have to have a set of like ethics or, kind of, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, modes of ways of kind of dispelling things, but also illuminating things. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
find that really
Huh.
interesting. And I know
Yeah.
you for a long time have worked with the art of memory, and I love that in the sense that I remember reading once somebody asked a magician, I forget who exactly, but they asked him, what's the best book I could get to begin magic? And they shared a critical thinking book, you know, and I
Yeah.
love that. I
Yeah.
was like,
That's
yeah,
great.
that's yeah, of course, because you do kind of need those, those kind of basics of yeah, of like introspection and of modality to like, work through
Mm-hmm.
before getting into this. And memory really speaks to me in that sense. Because I'm sure you're finding that cross like pollination kind of in everything you do, the art of memory.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the art of memory, I think a lot of people don't know or maybe not be familiar with how prevalent and everywhere it was, up through, the 1500s and into the 1600s. The printing press kind of killed it, but it was a really, really common practice. It's alluded to in the Arbatel, actually. The Arbatel mentions the art of memory. Um, you see it all over the place in some of that older stuff, and I think that one of the things that I've been trying to get across to people is that Renaissance magic, like grimoire magic, is imaginal. It relies very heavily on the world of the imagination and the inner vision. And I mean, and this is just such a huge part of it. It comes up over and over and over again. It's easy to ignore, and but it's still there, and it's one of the biggest, I think, hurdles that people have to get over in order to approach this stuff or even approach magic in general is you can't do magic without imagination.
Sure.
Like it's
It's in the
impossible.
word. Yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
Are we gonna make up a new word? Imagination? Nope, doesn't work.
Magic
Sounds
Nation. Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
Imagination.
Don't get me started on portmanteaus. I'll be here all day. Uh,
Port
but
imagination.
yeah. But no, I love that. Like, for somebody that is going to take your class, do you give a kind of like a list of prerequisites, for lack of a better term, or like
Hmm.
kind of material for somebody that wants to take an Arbatel class, like you have coming
Hmm.
up? And I put the link in the chat. That's also in the description. But yeah, do you kind of let people know what they should prime themselves with maybe before jumping in?
Uh, Probably not as much as I should, but I kind
Okay.
of figure that anybody who already knows what the Arbatel is, they're gonna be at least somewhat familiar. Just like, you know, anybody who is watching this stream or listens to either of our podcasts has probably, you know, done an LBRP or made a sigil before. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
they're not they're not green.
Right.
They're so I don't
They're
worry
purple.
about that a whole lot. Did you say they're purple?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? It's a good color.
Yeah, no, yeah, I guess you're right too, and to have like, the the whole thing of, purchasing, the class, finding it out, like, there is
Hmm.
already kind of an implied, yeah, um,
Yeah,
familiarity with it all. But,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It makes me
Y
think. Actually, there's this line in the Arbatel that says, "Magicians can't be made; they're born that way from their mother's womb." And
Mhm.
I read that, and I was sort of like, "Well, shit. How are we supposed to know? How are we supposed to know if it's for us?" And then I was like, "Probably we don't need to worry about it. You know, if our life's path has led us down this road and has led us to the Arbatel and has led us to working with it, we were probably we're, it's
Eh
probably what we were meant to do."
yeah, it was probably birthed in the womb. Um,
Yeah.
but I love that, yeah, 'cause it's true, there's such a huge intuitive aspect to it all, like, it's gotta sing with you. I think there was a place I might have a couple of years ago might have been a little persnickety about, just the academics, non-practitioners or something.
Uh
Um,
huh.
which I see there's a wonderful place for those too. And it's not on them that none of the currents of which they studied didn't sing to them enough to practice it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have the knowledge and like the passion and the drive to kind of research all these currents. So yeah, you're right. It's like it's got to sing to you, or it doesn't.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's definitely, yeah. I think that's better than I put it.
So with the three, like we'll say like the Agrippa, the three occult books.
Uh
Um,
huh.
I know that there's maybe some roadblocks and folks. There's a lot of linguistic roadblocks, or maybe more of like uh, you know the way it's written, right?
Uh
Um,
huh.
it may not be digestible. Like, have you found any kind of methods for folks to maybe get over the sense of you know, uh, maybe those sort of linguistic, I don't know, roadblocks. I'll just keep saying that.
Well,
I'm having a
yeah.
linguistic
I mean,
roadblock
I think
right
that
now.
the best way to get over the linguistic roadblock is to get Erik Purdue's translation, like his,
Okay.
because he released a new translation a few years ago. And it's good. It's really good. Like, it's readable. It's got footnotes. It kind of tells you what's going on. It helps a lot. Uh, like with Agrippa in particular, three books of occult philosophy, the biggest roadblock is just that it's friggin' enormous.
Yeah, it's
You know,
huge.
it's huge, and large parts of it kind of read like nonsense to the modern reader.
Hmm.
Um, Especially Agrippa is, sort of like natural science, natural history sort of stuff, a lot of which is cribbed from Pliny the Elder. So there's like a lot of weird bullshit in it. So
Yeah.
you have to wade through a lot of stuff. It takes patience. Three books of occult philosophy, it requires a little bit of patience and um, giving yourself license to roll your eyes when needed.
Yeah. That's what it means. That objective, judgmental ghost of yourself that
Yeah,
can laugh,
you need the critical thinking class.
Yeah.
But I think also that as you start to get into it, you have to understand, like, when Agrippa is sort of speaking literally and when he is speaking in a way that doesn't necessarily require us to abandon 400 years of science.
Right.
Three books of occult philosophy was published in 1535. Like,
Hmm.
the Agrippa never even got a chance to read Copernicus. He had no concept of the modern view of the cosmos or the world or whatever. Like, he comes from a time that is very alien but also strangely familiar to us.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and so that can be confusing. It can be really tempting to just throw everything out. Um,
Yeah.
but But what I've found is once you start getting into places where he's talking about, the role of uh, imagination or the role of divine light or his approach to sort of viewing the I mean, this is not the right word. I was going to say the calculus of the world, but that's really not the machine of the cosmos and how
Sure.
things are interconnected. And he's got these beautiful passages
The
on
music of the spheres.
yeah, the music of the spheres,
Yeah.
the divine frenzy. Like Agrippa is a huge proponent for like listening to sort of like the inner self and trusting intuition or um, trusting visions and dreams and all these sorts of things. So there's a lot of like really gorgeous stuff in the three books of occult philosophy, as well as like a lot of hints as to finding like beauty in contemplation, perhaps.
Hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like finding animus in one's own thoughts themselves. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. But
Yeah.
also, a huge thing that I think is really important in Agrippa is his approach to the inner world as a method of perception.
Hmm.
So, the imagination isn't just something that you are creating, but it is something that receives impressions from the celestial world or from the spirit world around you or whatever. So,
Right. There's a
yeah,
imaginarium, yeah, that we're all
yeah.
tapping or creating, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for him, no man is an island, I guess. Nobody is an
Right.
island. Even in your imagination, even in the private world of your imagination, there are still impressions and senses and images that are impressed on you from without, from beyond. And
Hmm.
so I think a big part of that is really important. His sections on planetary magic and astrological magic are still incredibly influential. A lot of modern astrologers who are doing astrological magic are still relying on Agrippa for a ton of that stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And in
Yeah,
addition, of
absolutely.
course, yeah, anybody who's interested in sigil magic, Agrippa's approach to sigils and their relationship with sort of like astrology and astromechanics or whatever, I think is like intrinsic and it's gorgeous, right? Like it's beautiful stuff.
Yeah, the magic
Even if you
squares and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But like even if you aren't a fan of astrology, the combination of astrology and the crafting of sigils is um, is kind of poignant because it is a way of encoding sort of like time and space into your magical artwork, which I
Yeah.
think is kind of cool. So yeah, I've been
Yeah.
thinking about this a lot. I've been I made a whole podcast series on Agrippa,
Hmm.
and then I've been working on turning it into a book. So I'm writing a book. It's taking me forever. I'm like 90% done, but I've been
I
90% done
know,
for like
and
6 months.
well, it was so funny because when we were talking, and we were talking about possible subjects, like it
Hmm.
seemed like we both had hit that synchronous, kind of modern applications of these otherwise kind of archaic, currents
Hmm.
and whatnot. And you told me that you were working on a book, kind of about that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think my book is very much sort of focused on bringing making Agrippa relevant for the 21st century magician. Like how can you take Agrippa seriously, and what can you take seriously? What do you absolutely have to throw out? What is deserving of attention? Like so, and I mean, there's a ton of it in there. Like his stuff on correspondences is super important. Uh, his sort of like approach to the cosmology of spirits is sort of like a really huge part of modern magic, but it is rarely looked at very closely. So, that's, I think, something that's important to dig into. And then his stuff on imagination And then kind of just understanding some of the things. Like he leaves a lot of secrets too. He leaves a lot of stuff where,
Yeah.
he's like, here's a thing I know exists, but I don't know how to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I love that in. I think not to make it about me, but just as like a personal experience,
Uh-huh.
parallel is that, yeah, it's like haunt manual or whatever. It's not an actual manual for somebody to do, like to
Mm-hmm.
like to perform these exact things. It's more of like a collection of like how somebody created their own in a way, and like
Right.
these are the findings. So maybe it's like more intrinsically motivating about the 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 way towards magic and artistry or whatever, and I can see that in like a grip or the Arbatel, like they have, there's like a spectrum of that as well, like
Mm-hmm.
here's how, here are these kind of these equations, right, and these are the possible ways to do it, but like again, we're not gonna flesh them out entirely, but still there's
Yeah. Yeah.
like there's a method, there's like a magical motivation, like a missing link, I think, on a lot of these works that I find a lot of people ask me when they're starting. It's like, yeah, but I need magic to be motivated to do magic. Like
Right.
I need an operation to give me some drive into, uh, getting in the deep end of all this stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, have you come across that at all in your teaching? Have folks kind of just had a
Yeah.
hard
I
time with
mean,
that first step? Yeah,
I think everybody has a hard time with that first step.
yeah.
I mean, you and I probably just don't remember it very well because it was a while ago. But like,
Oh, I remember it every day. Yeah, it still
really,
happens.
yeah. I
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I still have it too. Yeah, because I mean, you go through long periods of not doing shit, where your altar just sits there and
Mhm.
collects dust or whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, I usually just tell people that the, the they just have to make the jump. Like, you just have to just go do something. Like, go do a ritual, see what it feels
Yeah,
like. Go sit and
I love
meditate for
the
5 minutes. See how it goes.
yeah, do a ritual to do rituals, and when you're doing that, you would have done a ritual, so you're doing the ritual. So,
The
yeah.
fastest way to make magic work.
Yeah. To do magic to make magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I love that, we did have a question, from Instagram,
Sweet.
woo122 says, "So where should I look to find Agrippa's thoughts on sigils? Maybe I'll wait for your book." That and the books of occult philosophy, has
I mean, you
some
should.
good stuff.
I mean, God, let's see. It's in book 3. Oh wait, I think it's later in book 2. But just flip through until you find the parts with the magical alphabets, because it's right around there.
Yeah.
And you'll
But yes.
see. Yeah, yeah. But
Oh,
also,
I
I've
was
got
just
a
gonna
I've got
say,
a
and you
class
should
on it.
wait for his book.
Yeah, but I do have a class on it called Renaissance Sigils. It's just I don't think I have it offered online yet, but I'll be doing that soon.
Beautiful. Yeah, and yeah, some folks in on YouTube. We got Oswald Spangler, who's ready for the keytar that's
Hi,
coming.
Oswald Spangler. Welcome to Chad's Keytars.
Famed philosopher Oswald
Yes,
Spangler.
yes.
Uh,
uh,
Luciferius, what's up, dude?
hey, Luciferius, how's it going?
Nocmente.
Man, it's been a while since I talked to him.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
well, I mean, should I play some
yeah.
keytar?
You should. Yeah. Let's break out some keytar.
All
Let's
right.
hear some applied magical jazz.
All right, I'm going to warn everybody that I'm not very good at music. Let me give a little bit of background on the keytar. So, when I was a child, when I was very young, back in the 20th century, I took piano lessons for like 10 years, but then I didn't touch keyboards for ages. Like, even when Keats, when you and I first met, I lost him again.
Oh no, I'm still here. I
Oh,
just
you're still
wanted to
there?
give you
Okay.
full screen. Yeah.
Yeah, even like when you and I first met, like I wasn't doing any music then, but I was given a digital piano, like I don't know, 2019 maybe, and I started practicing again, and then when I was on Lexa's uh, podcast, we made some sort of joke about keytars, and the idea got stuck in my head. So I did end up getting a keytar. So I have a keytar here. It's going through a Korg Volca FM2, which is an FM synthesizer. And I didn't practice any songs, so I'm just gonna make some shit up.
Let's
And
do it. I'm gonna go ahead and mute and give you the
okay. I'm gonna
spotlight here.
mute my microphone, and if you tell me that if you want me to stop, you just have to yell at me.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Nice.
And just
great.
a little bit of synthesizer abuse.
I love it. Yeah, going through the vocal as you're basically like your synth brain, because that's a MIDI trigger, really, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a synthesizer with a keyboard attached. But you know, the Volcas they're these little itty bitty units. I could hold mine up, but it's got all these wires plugged into it.
Yeah, same with mine. But
Yeah.
they're super affordable for folks looking to get into like modular synthesized music that's hardware based, and you don't need a computer. You don't even need to do it MIDI. They can be standalone. They're perfect. They're like 150 bucks. They're Korg. They sound great. They're classic. Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are battery operated too, so like they're just so handy. Yeah, they're really great little things. So yeah, I guess my one of the weird things about learning keyboards again has been like breaking out of all the stuff that I learned as a kid, because I was never really told to just screw around on the piano as a kid. It's always like, you know, learn this classical piano, learn how to play this piece, and it was all sheet music all the time. So it's been a journey of like relearning skills that I had, and then breaking things that I'd learned, and then I'm really interested in learning how to just improvise. And I mean, you know, I'm okay. It's coming along.
I love it.
It's a
No,
slow
that's
process.
great. Hopefully, I'm still trying to work out getting down to Portland next week. But yeah, hopefully there can be an improvised session with all of that.
I hope so.
Yeah, because honestly,
I will.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, improvisation. You know, it's something like I was never really a fan as like an audience member so much. Not in like the construct of like you know, American like rock and roll, like improvised music.
Yeah.
Just you know, but what I found is that transposition of, you know, like this ramshackle kind of metaphysical workings is improvised communion, right? And then kind of putting that with music and all the talismans or instruments and tools, and like this intuitive kind of dance or choreography with it has like it's just been a wellspring of of inspiration, really.
Yeah, I guess it's more like when you're one of the improvisers, it's more meaningful than when you're one of the audience members
Sure,
because
and it would
yeah.
have to be, there, obviously there's exceptions, and I listen to, Max Roach improvise on drums all day, every day.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah,
But
for sure.
there's just a lot of like form fitting kind of maybe genres or whatever. All I'm saying is that I think like uh improvisation isn't kind of just beholden to like the style of music. I think it's widely understood as like either jazz or
Mhm.
fish or something.
Yeah.
So
Well, blues
yeah.
has yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so I kind of started playing around with jazz. Jazz is hard.
Yeah.
But because I was sort of like, oh, if I'm going to play the piano and sound cool, I should learn how to play the blues. So I
Hmm.
started playing the blues, but then blues has a lot of rules. And I was like, this is annoying. I want something without rules. And so uh,
Yeah, I
there's
guess. Yeah,
some
I guess.
sense of jazz that doesn't have rules, but also it does because people still want it to sound like music. So,
Yeah, it's interesting how these theorists and like musicologists or whatever like
hmm
have put these kind of rules on stuff, because when I think of blues, what I grew up on and what kind of inspires me to this day are people like Skip James or um Mississippi John Hurt, or like these
hmm
Delta kind of blues guys that with a three-string broken acoustic.
yeah.
They don't know their tunings. They're like literally just feeling the instrument and the emotion, right? Coming from what they're singing
hmm
about to the rhythm. Like there's not really any rules there at all. You know what I mean? If anything, the rule would be, to not have them be so stringent. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And I think another thing that I've been trying to get comfortable with is sort of like the negative space of silence when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
playing. Like that's a hard one. Piano just always feels like this instrument that's just supposed to fill up all available space.
Hmm.
But but you can't do that on the keytar because you only have one hand. so
No, that's
so
that's a
that's
great yeah, that's a great operation to discover too, I think, is yeah, knowing
mhm.
when to choke, like knowing when to
Yeah.
not to play is just as valuable as when to play. I mean, I find even just in my composition, like I've noticed how busy my shit can get, and it's like a muscle you have to exercise, when to like breathe in a composition or breathe when you're
Mhm.
playing, and
Yeah.
people
Huh.
will fill up
Interesting.
every waking moment with a sound, so
Yeah.
I get yeah.
Yeah.
No, but
But I do have like so uh one of the other things that kind of got me started on improvising music was incorporating it into magical ritual.
mhm,
And this is one of the things we were talking about before. Like, I feel like I'm kind of a music dummy. Like, I'm not really awesome at it or anything like that. But when I was first sort of thinking about this, um, my friend Drake the Swamp Wizard, who maybe he's watching us right now. I don't even know. But he convinced me to get a lira, a seven-stringed lyre, and
mhm,
you can't really you basically just open tune those and you can't go wrong. Anything you play on them sounds good.
yeah,
But they are like so I started to discover that you can kind of use them as sort of like this rhythmic instrument while you're meditating and you just sit there
mhm,
and you just sort of like drum 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 and from there I started to get a little bit more creative with music during ritual. But like one of the like my primary magical group does sort of like a lot of PGM stuff, and they really enjoy just improvised lyra music during ritual. Like they so I kind of also really want to encourage magicians to be musicians, even if
yeah,
you are the shittiest musician on the planet. Like, get a tambourine with a drum head on it and just go thunk, thunk, thunk while you're doing your ritual. And it adds like this incredible, it's probably better than incense for
yeah.
making ritual better.
No, I mean, I agree. That's been my like biggest yeah, that's been the biggest confluence in my life,
hmm
has been that those two things kind of tethered together for like a third mind situation, you know.
Oh
um
yeah, yeah.
I Yeah, because it really it was almost pragmatic how I came to like the metaphysical leanings was because I was reaching states of consciousness, or like a sort of hypnagogia, like through my musical like creation, or
Uh-huh.
constructions and stuff. And then it was like, where is this coming from? What am I tapping into? And you find real easily like the rhythms, the psychic exhaust of actually like interacting with the somatic while you're trans-dimensionally wayfaring somewhere else is like very, it's
Yeah.
it's like very matter of fact of what praxis is. And yeah, I love that. I agree with you. I think I would give a little caveat. I think everybody that's interested in magic, I think music would be the perfect like motivational jumping off point. Just getting through the idea that you're not good or you can't play, and
Mm-hmm.
picking up something and just going for it. That's a magical right in and of itself. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great introductory portion to it. But I
This
would
is
also say making sure that it's like there is some somatic interaction, making sure that there
yeah.
is beautiful. Yeah, making sure
Yeah.
that there is like there's a way that you are kind of dancing with the somatic, the kind of physical, as well as hitting these things. I think you'll find like true grounding, like true purpose within that, because I I think you can, and I have, but I'm not sure if it was more psychosis. But like you can reach these states, programming um your own samples in a MIDI, thing, hours
Uh-huh.
on end. But that might be just blue light fever. I don't know. They all probably come from the same place, but I think it's important for me, especially,
Uh-huh.
is to leave kind of a lot of the digital stuff, um, like more analog than digital, if that makes sense. I love the confluence of the two for sure, but I think the interaction, like the body kind of physical interactivity, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's singing, hitting, strumming, whatever, is very important to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're definite. Yeah, actually, and that's part of the performance, part of ritual too. Like
Yeah.
the physical performance. Like you should have motion and movement. But yeah, this is the lyra that I was talking about. They're cheap. You can get them on Amazon. There's like all different types of them. I haven't tuned this in a long time, so if I strum this, it'll sound probably horrific.
I like it. I like Discord though. I find harmony in Discord. But no, that's, yeah, that's beautiful. You know, of course my mind is automatically, oh, put a contact mic on that thing, run it through a delay. And now, since the show that you were at No Fun in Portland,
Uh-huh.
finally I've been threatening about doing this forever, because I've been playing with Ash Plains Adrian, who
Uh-huh.
does MIDI triggering with original footage live in the projections. And
Oh
so,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I got home and rebuilt a new suitcase. I'm adding my 4-track like cassette player. It can be standalone musically, all analog,
Uh-huh.
or I have that little like, yeah, Focusrite interface that I just throw into a laptop, and I can trigger my own footage and like do actual videomancy kind of interactivity. So
Are
it's
you
not
going
just
to
musical, it's like working with almost memory and like
Mhm.
you know,
Are you
yeah.
going to use your Volca drums to as the MIDI trigger for that, or are you going to have some other thing like a
So
big MIDI button, just one button instrument?
no, so right now what I have is I have basically like the cassette tape loops,
Mm-hmm.
the drum machine, maybe my own hardware effects. I have them
Mm-hmm.
running through it, and then depending on the footage, like I can trigger like, over this hertz, you know, trigger the opacity here, like every bass kick, do this.
Oh,
Every
cool.
tape loop that comes in, yeah, play this footage or whatever. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's like yeah, it's all reactive, but it's that kind of talismanic building your universe. It's like
That's
not only are you
awesome.
constructing all the sound and like through ritual, but you're also interacting um with footage, with like a
Right.
four-dimensional almost like projection and construct of things. Yeah.
That
So
sounds really cool.
yeah.
And the tape looper, does it send out MIDI signals too?
No, it's
Oh,
purely analog. Yeah, it's just
cool.
it's my 4-track
Yeah. Okay.
like yeah, cassette. Because when you saw me at the show, I was using like a just a cheapo handheld cassette thing and was like, this is ridiculous when I have, 4 tracks where I've recorded, on different tracks and I could actually live
Uh-huh.
mix things, from the
Mm-hmm.
4 tracks. So, but yeah,
Oh, that'll be
this is all
cool.
coming back to this ramshackle kind of kitchen sink, like
Mm-hmm.
what I have around, being magnanimous with like otherwise mundane, applications of music.
Uh-huh.
And like, yeah, igniting those little processes and having real fun, like creating, a space, a magical space or
Yeah.
a world, basically, right? So,
Oh, for
um,
sure.
and that's
I
all.
love it.
That's this is all like affordable stuff too. It's not what I
Mm-hmm.
loved about you talking about the Korg Volca or people, if they're wanting to break into this, they don't even you don't need an expensive laptop. You could use your phone. Like
Oh
there
man,
are all
and
these ways to
yeah,
yeah.
like, and there are some super super cheap MIDI controllers that are still great. You know. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Go to Goodwill. You can I have
Yeah.
a collection of old Casio tones
Oh
from the
man.
80s, and you can find one for $20, and they probably even have a MIDI adapter or like a turnover, in the box of wires. Like Goodwill has been that's probably the cathedral for ramshackle magic. Goodwill.
I'm
Yeah.
afraid. I'm afraid to go to Goodwill because I know that I'm just going to come home with more junk, and I
Yeah.
just don't. I have already way more keyboards than I have hands, and I feel like I've like. I feel like there should be a cat rule. You know, the cat rule, like your household is on the verge of becoming a crazy cat house if you have more cats than hands to pet them with.
I love that. Yeah, it's a good
And I
rule.
feel like there
Rule
might
of cat.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, the rule of cat. I feel like there might be a rule of keyboard that is similar to that.
Yeah. Well, this is the issue, right, with the ramshackle magic is like
Mm-hmm.
the suitcase that I've spent all this time laboring over and working with signal flow, like all of what I'm doing with it can be done with a laptop. You don't need all
Yeah.
of that. But like it's
Yeah.
the process of actually having the physical, the artifacts and like the way to
Mm-hmm.
manipulate and to physically interact, with things and the magnetic, correspondence with the tape and like all of these like beautiful old machines that take up so much space, but you only need it for one small part, or one little thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Plus,
luckily yeah.
laptops are fragile and delicate and expensive, and you don't want to take them around places. Like,
Well, yeah, and unfortunately until I can afford Super 8 camcorders and like overhead
uh huh.
projection, that I can, I don't know, grow more limbs to physically operate. Um, Unfortunately, like after
Till you
years
can
of
break the
saying,
rule of cat.
yeah, after years of saying no laptops live, because back in 2004 to like 2007, I was performing with a laptop that was old at that time. You know what I
Uh
mean?
huh.
Breakdowns and just quality issues, and it burned me forever to never,
Mm-hmm.
perform with laptops. But we've got so far and the technology's gotten good enough that it should be fine. I just can't get around the video and the projection stuff without a laptop. But it's
Yeah, that
taken
might
years
be
to fit all of these things in a suitcase. You know what I mean? Like it's
right.
taken
Right.
years of trial and
You've had to
error to
find,
figure out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have to find the exact right gear that does exactly what you need it to, and then you have to figure
Mhm.
out if there's a small version of it. Yeah, I mean, I went through that same thing, like, uh, because I want to be able to perform live with the keytar, but I don't want to haul around a giant synth unit.
Right.
So
The
the
brain.
tiny
Yeah.
chord was so perfect. I'm like, oh, I mean, it makes noise. Like it sounds enough like an electric piano. Before I hit any of the switches and stuff,
It sounds
it
and
sounds enough like an electric piano that it's fine.
yeah, it sounds like a synth.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah, which
it's
is cool.
no,
I
it's
love synth.
well, it's great. It's hardware too. Like that's what I was saying. It's got an out. You
Hmm.
can plug that thing into an amp and you're fine. There's no
Yeah,
need to bring a laptop into this
right.
transaction. You know,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah,
like
and
that. Like
I did get an amp. I got a like a $20 battery powered, like I think it's like 3 watt or 5 watt amp, and it
a pig
sounds,
nose. Yeah,
oh, worse than that.
yeah.
But yeah, but like a little cheap thing like that. And I mean, it can get loud, but it makes everything sound like a super bad surfer guitar.
I love it.
Yeah,
That's my jam.
I know.
But I was gonna
I'm
say,
looking
the
forward to
next
seeing it.
step is to fasten a utility belt that holds the Volca and the amp, and to busk with it, just to
Oh
walk
yeah,
around.
that's my next goal. That's my
Yeah,
next goal.
your next attainable goal. Yeah.
I'm going to go busking. I think at first I'll probably be kind of stationary in one spot, but I'm definitely going to go busking. So anybody who lives in Portland, start carrying loose change
Yeah.
for
And
buskers, for
I love it.
keytar buskers.
Throw change at somebody. Yeah, it's funny. Harmony in Discord, that's exactly what a solitary lunatic would say. Thank you, Oswald. Um, I think it's like was Oswald Spengler like the father of nihilism or whatever?
I have no
Telling
idea.
me I'm a solitary lunatic.
I mean, it's a familiar name, but I feel like the profile picture there, kind of reminds me of the main character from The Shield.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Be a Beautiful. I think this was about your lyre, Lyra. Oswald Spengler
What?
also says, would a harmonica that only plays the note of C be called a charmonica or
Well, I mean,
carmonica?
oddly enough, harmonicas tend to be keyed,
Yeah,
so you would get a C harmonica for sure.
yeah.
But I
And
don't know if it would, you know, evolve into a Charmazard.
Charmazard, I love it. Its final form. He says the profile pic is the Italian singer Marco Beasley.
Beasley. Okay. All right.
Not related to Aubrey Bees. That's Beardsley. Never mind.
That's Beardsley.
Yeah. Never mind. Well, great. Yeah. So other than, the upcoming Arbatel class, Arnemancy, the podcast, which
Hmm.
is still going strong. I think we did touch a little bit about your most recent episode, just in the subject of, the kind of coaching, or like the
Hmm.
uh what was the term you used that your guest was talking about? It's like a spiritual.
Oh, you're talking about Nick Latursky, Dr.
Yeah,
Nick, right?
yeah.
Um, he called it spiritual counseling, I believe.
Counseling. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a really interesting topic. I am very curious about that. Yeah, Dr. Latursky is really, really cool. That's definitely an episode worth checking out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was funny because when we were talking about teaching and like the impetus of teaching, and especially
Hmm.
with all these kind of threads, like if you've, considered jumping into that, or, what are your findings after speaking with the doctor? Like, is
Uh,
that kind of a lose
it,
lose
it
situation?
takes, well, I mean, it takes schooling, and I'm
Yeah.
bad at taking classes. I'm bad at being in school. I'm not good at homework. I'm also not certain. I'm not certain that that's a path that I'm necessarily called towards.
Right.
I Yeah. So I don't know. I think I'd be more interested in going to a spiritual counselor than being one.
Right, yeah. I just see a
Um.
lot of times, when folks are kind of in the trades of
Hmm.
teaching a culture, or, occult knowledge of some sort, that they also double dip into, um, spiritual
Yeah.
counseling. And what's
Yeah. I see
funny
that
is,
too.
yeah, I I wonder, I guess maybe this is the last topic or the last point to discuss, but can somebody be a great preacher that can't practice?
Well, that's a. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I don't know that. I don't know that somebody who doesn't practice magic could teach magic,
Okay.
but at the same time, apparently Eliphas Levi never practiced, and everybody thinks he was the bee's knees. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. I don't necessarily know. I mean, I think it probably depends on what you're teaching. I mean,
Right.
since so much of the stuff that I'm teaching is like getting people to have these sorts of spiritual experiences in a very subjective internal world. If I hadn't been practicing that myself, how would I tell them how to get there?
Right. I suppose, and to tie it in with the spiritual counseling too, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
would you want to take advice from somebody with like sound experience, or do you want to take advice from somebody that's been through the similar rigmarole or whatever, or like the trials
Yeah.
and tribulations? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think Dr. Latursky did a really good job. I keep wanting to just call him Nick because he's
Yeah.
my buddy. We have lunch and stuff, but Dr. Latursky, he does a really good job sort of outlining that too. He has some example stories that some of his clients gave him permission to share, where you listen to him and you're like, I would never, I would not know what to think about the advice that I would be getting on this particular issue if I didn't have confidence that the person giving me the advice had gone through some sort of spiritual experience or magical training or magical practice or something. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you need to have gone through all the shitty fire before you can tell somebody how to put it out, right?
Yeah.
Like how else are you qualified? I mean, maybe that's what the schooling part is about. See, I don't know. I'm not qualified to talk about this all the
Yeah.
time.
I know these are big questions to end on, but it is kind of
Yeah.
I think relevant, especially for somebody that works within the fields. Also, to touch on what we started talking about in the beginning, kind of the cultural zeitgeist of folks looking into this, and then
Mm-hmm.
with that comes the influx of folks that probably shouldn't be teaching or counseling that
Yeah.
are, or
Oh my God, like tarot readers who don't know what they're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
right,
I mean, it's funny. Like I do enjoy doing divination for people, but I don't think that it's the same thing as spiritual. It's not the same thing as spiritual counseling. It's not. It's nowhere close, right? Like the diviner tries to get people to look at things from a different perspective, or opens up doors of perception, and spiritual counselor is there for something a lot different. So yeah.
yeah. For sure, yeah. I didn't mean to use that as like a catch-all for that kind of
Right. Right.
oeuvre or
Right.
whatever, but yeah, we're on the same page with that. But yeah, I know big things to think about, but all that to say, I think you're a magnanimous and wonderful teacher.
Well,
And
thanks.
yeah, I
I think you're an
love what
incredible
you're doing. I
musician.
love that.
I love what you're doing. But
But
thank
yeah,
you,
no, and
thank
I
you.
think it's great that yeah, and I think we definitely are we are in the same kind of area of things right now, that
Mm-hmm.
how do I say it? I don't know. There's like a lot of parallels, and I love that you're, really opening up musically, and I love that
Mm-hmm.
you're helping aid in kind of the applications of or opening the roadblocks that people might have about, these old grimoires. So your work is
Yeah, I'd like
appreciated.
to. I mean, I feel like if nothing else, we're in an occult renaissance out there, and I want to see some. I want to see some cool innovation that builds on some of this old grimoire stuff. So the best way to do that is to get people to look at it and stuff, and then go play music about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And yeah, make art because art is magic. And with
Yeah.
that, I think we'll head out. But yeah, arnemancy.com for all your links, podcasts, and everything. Please check the description for his Arbatel class. I'm definitely going to be looking to joining. And yeah, pleasure as always, buddy. Good to see you, and I hope to see you next week.
Great to see you too. I hope that we get to maybe we'll play some music.
Hell yeah! All right. Have a great Sunday, everyone.